Let's see here. What are we talking about today? Yeah, there was a halacha that came up. You heard that they finally got back Hadar Goldin's remains, right? You heard of that? That's from like what? Well, yeah, it was true. They even had a funeral for him. They didn't tell you. They don't let you guys hear the news. Well, okay, fine. So that was big news. Yeah, because you know about him. You don't need to be introduced like what his circumstances were, right? Goldin, Hadar Goldin fell in I think Protective Edge years ago, more than a decade ago, and the usual bad guys were keeping his remains hostage. If you call the dead hostages, I think there's a different word for it. Either way, they were doing their usual extortion. So there was a massive search for him, and eventually they got him back, and it was closure, thank God. And it's good that eventually they get to bury people. Remember, there's an extra bracha in Birkas Hamazon because the casualties finally got to be buried. But there was something there that I thought was very important. My view is that the entire Gaza Strip should be given to the Jewish people, specifically to the Jewish people who fought to control the Gaza Strip. Okay, it should be divided among the men who went to war. Okay? All the men who were enlisted deserve a nice big chunk of the conquered land, and also the lands in Lebanon and so-called Syria, and God willing, across the Jordan River. All those are supposed to be part of Eretz Yisrael, and all those are supposed to be the possession of those who volunteered to fight on its behalf. If you're a Jew and you choose not to fight in the army, you don't have to, but you just get nothing. Okay? You don't deserve your own piece of land for that. Unless you're a Levi, and then you get token pieces, and you get an apartment. Okay, but other than that, no, you don't deserve it. If you wanted a piece, you should have fought for it, or at least been willing to fight. So that's what should have been done. Now, I had a havamina that there is a halacha. I'm going to read you the halacha. It's a very quick halacha. It's in the Rambam. It's taken straight from the Gemara. That sort of strengthens the Jewish hold on the land, but then it doesn't. What does it say? It says in Laws of Kings and Their Wars. But I used to say Milchamothehem, their wars. But it turns out the better girsas are just what in the Rambam? Laws of Kings and Wars. And that makes more sense. You know why? Because you don't need a king. Sometimes you have to do it without a king. Like I said, the Rambam's rule is king is ideal, but Navi, Melech, Navi, Shofet, Nasi, whoever, de facto Jewish leader, is a stand-in for the king and has all those powers at the time. So he says, Kishahonim, Honim b'chol makom. Where the army makes camp, they do wherever they want. This sort of is parallel to the halacha that the king can make his road wherever he wants. Eminent domain, right? Eminent with an E, not an I.
Is the Third Amendment count contrary to Jewish law?
The Third Amendment,
which one that says soldiers can't use your
quartering.
Yeah.
So you can't. We don't have quartering, okay? But we do have the rule that the king seizes property, but then has to pay for it. Okay, he needs your vineyard, but he has to pay in full. He needs your vineyard to make a road, so he can take it, but he has to pay in full. Okay, but quartering isn't something we really had. I wonder what it says about quartering. People have to provide food for the soldiers. That says the halacha. Okay, but quartering I haven't seen. Why were they so much against quartering? By the way, quartering dates back. Quartering is mentioned in the Mishnah. It's like, for example, Psachim. The Gaius. What are they doing? They're even leaving their chametz there, and there's a big nafkamina halacha. So, what would Chazal say about the Jewish king's right to quarter soldiers? Coercive quartering. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. The British used to do that, so the colonists didn't want that anymore. I'm racking my brain trying to do it, but then again, I have a puny mind, so it's going to take me a while to think about it. You need food, yes. You have to. The king has the right to demand food and resources. Yeah, it's kind of weird. But then again, Jews always were happy to host others. So Achnasas Orchim is one of our midos. So either way, Cholim b'chol makom means the army can put its camp wherever it needs to. Right. Then it says Umishin erag b'milchama, someone who was killed in the war, v'makom she'yipol sham yikaver, where he falls, that's where he should be buried. He acquires his place like a Met Mitzvah, which, by the way, how do you translate that term? Literally means a mitzvah deceased, or a mitzvah corpse. So where's that term come from? Very interesting. There's some interesting ideas there that we're going to get into. But the Met Mitzvah, the general rule, the Takon of Yeshua, is that if you find someone, no one knows what happened to him, he's there, so you bury him right then and there. That's his spot. He acquires the spot, and then it says he actually acquires it. Here it says like a Met Mitzvah. Now, why did I think about this halacha? Because I was going to say that if soldiers, Chas v'sholom, fell in Gaza, so those places belong to those soldiers. They bury them right then and there. Did they do that, by the way? Is that what the army does? Is that what the army always did? No, they don't. They evacuate soldiers who are killed, right? Yeah, they have Har Herzl and other things. But it would be a major hold on the land if we could somehow say, you know what, the soldiers here, Jewish law, they used to have different religious groups, the Havdil, felt that if this land is now sacred, something happened here, so we're not going to give it up. It's a shame the Jews don't treat their holy land like that. We barely can convince people to say, this is holy land, you have to fight for it and never give it up at all costs. That's what war means. You have to even fight to hold on to this land, even if that fighting means you're endangering your lives, or many people's lives. That's what the whole idea of milchama is. That's why it's ridiculous, by the way, to say that, pikuach nefesh is docha everything, including land for peace. No, you're supposed to fight for the land. So it would help us hold on to land if we said, this soldier fell here, now it's his land, belongs to his family. So just cordon off a few acres around where that soldier fell and give that to the family of the soldier. But it turns out that's not necessarily the halacha. That's not the final say in the halacha. There actually is rules, as you've probably seen anyways. The Maisa, they don't do that, right? In the old days, they pretty much had to do that, by the way, especially if you go far away from home. People were buried where they were. So I'd like to bring up this idea. Look at the note over here. Who do we have to see? Here. Yerushalmi. Let's start with Yerushalmi. You guys ever see the Yerushalmi on this one? It's an Eruvin. I'm going to share it on the screen. And anybody who wants can look at it. It's an Eruvin in the beginning of this, in the second parak. What does it say here? It says here, Chodim b'chol makom, that's Yehuda ben Tema says, Uv makom shehein naragin, sham nikbarin. Okay? But either way, you understand what it's getting at. The place where they are killed, that's where they're buried. Why not? Shalo tomar yasu karugei polemosiyoth. Polemus. Okay? People just say polemus. Is that Latin or Greek? By the way, it's referring to major wars. When let's say Roman times, when they had a major war, major battles, so there are a lot of casualties. So they had like a mass grave. Afterwards, it's what you have to do in war. Collect all the weapons, anything of value, and bury the dead where they are. Okay? Is Tanai Asur Lefanotan? There were some Tanaim who said that it's forbidden to then remove them after the hostilities have ended, to remove them from the battlefield and bring them to a regular cemetery. With Tanoi, Mutar Lefanotan. And some say it's actually permissible. So what's the difference? Amar Rav Chasdai. Rav Chasdai said, Man damar mutar lefanotan bimchunasim. The opinion that said in the Tanaim that you can clear out the mass grave and eventually bury everybody separately was talking about when all the casualties are mechunasim. What's mechunasim? It means they're all in one place. I'll read you what the Korban Eda says to explain this. Shemunachim harbe yachad. Okay? A lot of casualties lying in one spot. Shebitoch shetzarich lefanotan la'asot v'chol echad karoilo, because you have to separate them. Each one gets the respect due to him. Mutar nami lefanotam l'chol makom shirtzeh. Once you're doing that, you can start moving them around. Okay, to any place. Take them back to the family cemetery, bring them back somewhere. So already in the Yerushalmi you have this precedent that, but if they're mechunasim, if they all fell in battle, so you mutar to decide that we'll give each one a separate burial in a separate place. By the way, do they have mass graves here in Israel anywhere? You ever hear of them? So it turns out there are ones in use today. Where? For example, this is something that my father tracked down, and others, yes. But also something that they did, the Hever Kadisha did on, let's say, the Mount of Olives, for the War of Independence. So the War of Independence was basically an attempted genocide. Guess who tried to genocide who? Okay? So the answer is, of course, it was the Jews they were trying to genocide, and the perpetrators happened to have been local, adjacent Jew haters who speak Arabic. So there are people who lived in the old city around the new city of Jerusalem, which is much smaller back then. Now, my my father's mother's father's brother, okay, which would be my father's maternal grandfather's brother, was a prominent individual among the Hasidic community in Jerusalem. He was a Stoner Hasid and a Rosh Yeshiva. So he was killed in the War of Independence. He was already an older man, and apparently he was trying. There was a siege around Jerusalem, and he was trying to bring water to the even more desperate people, and the Jordanians killed him. So for years, my father would come back and try to track down people who remember his late uncle. I remember as recently as only 18 years ago, my father found a guy on Erev Shabbos in Mea Sharim who remembered his grandfather's brother and even was helped him go to the mikvah on Shabbos, on Erev Shabbos, etc. It was right near the Zupnik mikvah, by the way. And there are people that had old pictures of him, so it was fun. But what my father can never find? His grave. So where's he buried? And eventually he tracked it down. The Chevra Kadisha has records. There are mass graves on Har Zisim that they dug for all the casualties, the civilian casualties of the War of Independence. And there in Hebrew it's called a Kever Achim. That's how they call it in modern Hebrew. Fine. So they do have those things in the cemeteries here in Israel, and there are a few others that they've had to use in extenuating circumstances. And the Man Damar says, "Asur l'fanotam b'mfuzarim." When it's forbidden to move these soldiers from where they're buried, it's when they're there, one's over there, each in his own place. Which means basically saying, according to Yerushalmi, that if an individual who's killed in battle, so according to at least Rav Chasdai's hachra'ah here, between those who say it's permissible to remove them, those who say it's forbidden to move them, okay? Is it permissible? Not you must, but you have to keep that soldier where he fell. So according to this opinion, Yerushalmi, that soldier has acquired that spot like a mace mitzvah, and it's his. By the way, even with regards to a mace mitzvah, you do move them around. If there's a convenient cemetery, or if it's a field of certain value, and there's other things that the Gemara gives, many exceptions, not just that the country will become littered with mace mitzvah. Okay? But over here, if you're just reading Yerushalmi, you would think that an individual soldier fell, so he actually is going to be staying there, and the implication is it's forbidden to move him. Okay? That's the first source. That's an interesting one. Do they follow that one? Okay, but that distinction's in Yerushalmi. I also put the translation over here. That's pretty good. Okay, let's see this one. This Tosefta Kifshuta? That's another thing. I thank God. It used to be I have to try to collect volumes of Tosefta Kifshuta, and they keep getting kicked around the base medrash because most people don't appreciate the Tosefta Kifshuta. So first I put it in a convenient bookshelf, and then they move it over here and they hide it, and then I put it in their thing, and then they get more Sifrei Musar. So now the Tosefta Kifshuta is on top of the bookshelf, which most people can't reach. It's gathering dust. And on the other side, you have the Encyclopedia Talmudica, right? Which people also don't appreciate enough. So thank God now you have the whole Tosefta Kifshuta, at least the parts I need, is available online, right? Which is good. So let's read here what it says. The Tosefta says. The Tosefta says, which by me before Yerushalmi says, Umakom Shenel Ragim Sham Nikbarim. That's why I thought that the word Yim is just extra there. Because here's the Tosefta, it says it straight up. The place where they fall, that's where they're buried. Not just most.
There's a lot of contractions.
Yeah, but they don't even need that word. It's not contracted. It says she ne'aragim. It just says she yin ne'aragim. Seems to be an addition of something.
It sounds like a shehem.
Maybe, but it's also unnecessary.
Like I say it wasn't, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, could be. Yes, I've seen a few of those. By the way, what does ka mean? The prefix ka. Sometimes it eventually was just a word, and sometimes it's just a prefix, just a kuf, right? With the kamatz. It used to be ka'im. Ka'im is like kayam, or standing, kam. So the word is ka'im, and that's shorter to ka'e. So sometimes you have the full word ka'im, sometimes you have ka'e, then you have ka as its own word, and then totally ka. So you could actually, I guess you could try using, what do they call that? That's, what do you call it? Criticism, higher criticism, or lower criticism, just dating the thing. It's found which layer, which century it comes from, by how short that word is. Okay. What does he say here? He says, Yerushalmi Bavli. Oh, no. There's a Yerushalmi and Bavli that mentioned this also. Ufershu Yerushalmi, Shelo Tomar, Yasu Kari, Harugei, Polomosiot. I don't know exactly how they knew how to vowelize this thing, but not like the Romans do when they have a big battle and they have a gigantic mass grave. Gomer Maseches Machoth, Smachos, wow, that's later than the Bavli, right? Is Smachos canon according to the Rambam? No. Why? It's post Bavli, so it's non-binding. But people still follow Smachos. It says in the 14th parak there, Kever Golin ein lehen chazakah. What's Kever Golin ein lehen chazakah? Basically, the people who are Golin, stuck in Chutz La'aretz. So you might know that they might eventually have to take away those graves. They're buried there, but it might just be temporary. Another reason not to live in Chutz La'aretz. B'shasa devru shata milchama ein lehem chazakah. So too, when there's a plague, some pestilence, or war, also there's no chazakah. Why war? Because extenuating circumstances, we have to bury people where we can before we can give them proper burials. V'atam kanireh shekovrim otam mechunasim. So the reason why there's no chazakah is apparently because they are mechunasim, like the Yerushalmi says, man demar, instead of man de'amar, mutar l'fanathan b'mechunasim. Okay, means that too many dead to deal with during the war. They're all together there, so eventually we'll give them proper burials individually. And that was said just for them, like a hurrah show, one that they keep using, but whenever there's a war, lisha'ad, just time of the battle. V'achar kach, mifanim utham leveith hakvaroth. And then they moved them to the base hakvaros. L'fichach amru shim ne'argu b'machaneh. It says, what about the Rambam also posits? If they're killed in the machaneh, and which is not the battlefield, right, for whatever happens, I don't know, why were they killed in the machaneh? Well, something happened. Nikbarim b'komam leolam. In that case, they would be buried forever. No extenuating circumstance. Ve'ein mifanim otam, and you cannot move their grave. So if someone dies on the base or something like that, he has to stay there. Do they do that? No. Okay. And then the Bavli, they asked a question. This is Eruvin, page 17. They said about the person who fell in battle, Pshita, meis mitzvahu, meis mitzvah kon mekomo. Shouldn't he, in meis mitzvah, why they should just leave him there? What's the chiddush that you said that bury him where he is? And the answer was, lo tzricha afagav de ithle kovrin. In this case, he has kovrin. The meis mitzvah, you just here. You have to do something. We don't know who he is. We don't know the family. You can't start dealing with that. There's the clock is running. Here the clock isn't running. But even so, he is like a meis mitzvah. Kolomar afil nerag b'machnei atzmo. Want to say that even though he was killed in the machaneh, she'ein sakana lishhoth l'kborotho v'veit hakvaroth. So now there's no problem. You do have time to go and bury him, bring him to the cemetery. Mikol makom nikbar b'makom shnerag. Doesn't really matter. You should still be burying him where he is. Do they do that? Yeah. No. So already we found two clear statements, one in the Yerushalmi, one in the Bavli, that do not fit what is done nowadays. I'm sorry. Don't worry. Don't die. Thank God. Okay. I don't know why they do this, but apparently that was what they assumed. This is a straight up Bavli. What do you got here?
He's killed and he passes away.
Yes, it's not so clear. Neharag means it doesn't say maith, right? The two versions we had. The Rambam said yipol, and here it says neharag. So it usually means killed in battle. So why was he killed in battle in the Machaneh? I don't know, surprise attack? I don't know.
There was the grenades.
Yeah.
Case. Who's that again?
Yeah, that happened also. These things blow up.
If someone's injured in battle and dies in the army hospital, does that count still as being killed?
I don't know. Good question.
Under the bed?
I guess you'll have to ask the rabbi that question. My old joke. Last day I'm on the job as a Tzol member. I took a code. Code means someone's coding. It means you have to do CPR. It means they're basically dead if you don't manage to revive them. That's a code. Code 1. Code red, So an older lady coded on Erev Tisha B'Av. Very rainy day. In New York, Israelis are surprised. It's summer in New York, but it could just be pouring rain. Real torrential rains. That's just how New York is. So it was torrential rains that morning, and it was in a residence adjacent to a synagogue because the rabbi owned the place. He had his own shtibel there. It wasn't even shtibel. It's a pretty nice sized synagogue he built, bigger than his house. So the older lady passed away right there, and she coded. So they thought maybe we could revive her. So we're doing CPR. And when you do, before they had the CPR machine, so CPR really tires you out. So you rotate out. So I rotated out off the schwitz. I sat down at his kitchen table, and turns out this older lady was pushing 100. She didn't have much of a chance. Her husband was the previous rabbi, and he passed away years ago. The son-in-law is now the rabbi, okay? And this is his mother-in-law, like in front, who's having this. He pulls me aside and he's asking questions, like if you could revive her, this and that, the life support and the thing, and the end of life questions suddenly, right? Why is he asking me? I don't know. I was a nice guy in yeshiva, so he thought he could talk to me because the other Hatzalah guys, I guess, didn't look as stark. Why is he pulling me aside? So I said to him, well, I guess those are questions you have to ask the rabbi. Okay? So why? The gentleman I was 24 years old. Fellows asking me this as well into his 60s and a long white beard and everything. So it's kind of weird that he's asking me those questions. So that's what you're going to ask the rabbi. Okay. Fortunately, most of the times you have that, they don't come back. But it has worked. The Ein Reisi, okay, of a CPR like thing where they did come back. They wake up. Like, so I was with the woman who went to cardiac arrest. It's not fun. And the chest compressions worked because the ambulance guy hit the gas and fell on her and boom, and just that boom was enough to do it, Woke up with a start, like, oh. Okay? Kind of crazy. Yeah, you shouldn't know these things. So here's the Chiddush. Rav Lieberman says, Yeresh Ikar Dibur Meis Mitzvah Kavanaso Meis Milchemes Mitzvah. Where does the expression come from? Until now we're reading that one who falls in battle is like a Meis Mitzvah. And a Meis Mitzvah is someone you find he's dead. By the way, have you ever had a Meis Mitzvah case? Also in Hatzalah, New York, they had this. The guys who train people said, sometimes you get a call. Lady in the apartment, something's wrong, we haven't seen her, go there. Maybe there's something fishy going on. You break down the door, and there's a person who's passed away, all alone, lived with nobody. Yeah, that's a regular Meis Mitzvah. Now you have a responsibility to take, to bring them to Kfura. Like, be responsible. You can't just walk away. And there are societies that deal with this, but I know people who've had Meis Mitzvah on their hands. Okay? So, but he says that the idea of Meis Mitzvah, the soldier Meis Mitzvah, actually the soldiers came first. The concept of a civilian Meis Mitzvah comes from Meis Bilchemes Mitzvah. That's why the word mitzvah is in there. Not just, I would have said that if it had nothing to do with the Milchama, and this term existed, like finding a dead person, no one to deal with him, it would have been, I don't know, Meith Avud, or Mi She'in Lo Kovrin. Some other term like that. Why is a Meis Mitzvah? So he says, Meis Milchemes Mitzvah. V'i Halacha Atika. He gives you sources, look up in Shami. Says that's the older halacha. Okay? Ufshita, Sheish Sakana Lavir Meith, Bishaf Milchama Milakom Makom. Why? Most of the time, burying dead people is not really a danger. It turns out the dead pose no harm to us so much, and no one's going to stop you. Most people feel sorry, so they'll let you conduct the funeral. But when you're dealing with, say, Romans who are vengeful, then you're going to have a case that just bring someone to burial is dangerous. Uvizman milchemes Aspasianus vehedrianus hareat tipul b'meith mitzvah hea karuch b'sakana rabba lam tapel u'mishpachto. In the times of the wars of Vespasian and Hadrian. By the way, how much time went between the two of them? Vespasian's wars is referring to the Great War, the Great Revolt, which ended in the destruction of Jerusalem in the year 69. Started a few years before that. Did Vespasian complete it? No, Titus did. How long later did Hadrian live? Well, Hadrian was like the 120s and 130s. Well, Bar Kokhba times, yeah. So Hadrian wasn't born during Vespasian's time. Hadrian is much later. So you have people like Rabbi Akiva. According to the Medrash, Rabbi Akiva lived to be 120. The Medrash says that four great rabbis all lived to be 120. Hillel and Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai and Rabbi Akiva all did like Moshe Rabbeinu, and they lived to be 120. And you think about that, wait a minute, Rabbi Akiva was killed at the age of 120. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't die of old age. It says he still had it, right? Rabbi Akiva was killed at the age of 120. So just an idea of there. And by the way, he didn't have Jewish genes. Right? Rabbi Akiva's father was a ger. Yeah, Yosef Hager. So in Hadrian's times, they even didn't let people bury. Burying the dead was actually, was a criminal act. You could get yourself killed trying to bury someone. Right? Beitar. So what happened? Okay, read that. The Gazaru came al kol harug shenimsa baderech. So Chazal made this gzera that Meis Mitzvah, bury him where he is, was from basically post-temple times. If you have a Meis Mitzvah, just bury him where he is because it's dangerous to you to bring him to the cemetery. That's where the whole idea comes from. That's what he's postulating here. Ufichach amrulo the Rabbi Akiva. That's why you see Yerushalmi there. Click the sources. What did they tell Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva lived, by the way, he was of normal age during destruction and really old during Hadrian's times. Like I said, he was killed well after, well into his 2nd century. Al kol psiya v'siya shayitha posea ma'alin alecha ki'ilu ha'itha shofech damim. Rabbi Akiva really tried to, he endangered himself, by the way, to bury the dead. He took risks to bring them to normal burial. The rest of the sages told him, you're actually doing an avera by taking so many steps. You should have just buried him there. By the way, Rabbi Akiva also endangered his life to do what? Teach Torah. Just keep the mitzvahs. He lived in Shema times. So Rabbi Akiva's philosophy was stick it to the Romans. I don't care what they'll tell me to do. Uvishav milchama regilahu kovrin et kol neragim bekever echad. So that's why they used to bury all the casualties in one spot. No. I'm reading the footnotes to the Tosefta Kifshuta, and the next thing is Yad Pshuta. So if they had to bury them all together, just one mass grave because of the danger, and then afterwards it was permissible to give everybody individual funeral. This whole idea that you bury everybody together is only because there was danger involved. The danger of trying to, give everybody proper respect. And then, because I'll extended it to any person who's deceased who has no, kovrim. Sorry, I said krovim, not krovim. Doesn't mean relatives. It means kovrim, any way to bury him at the time. Very interesting idea, of which most people, I would imagine there are some who disagree with his conclusion here, but it's a kind of interesting hypothesis. And this sort of explains why it is they bury people. This answers up, as we would say, the 2 points that we had before. We saw in the Yerushalmi, there are circumstances, the Fuzari, for example, you shouldn't be picking people up from where they fell in battle and just leave them there, right? That was the first thing you saw. And what was the second? The second point that was a little bit strange, that those who die in the Machane. But now the way Rav Lieberman has given this idea, says it's all about the sakana. If there's no sakana, so you could technically move people around when necessary. And the last issue was something that Rabbi Rabinovich points out over here in the Abshuta. He quotes the Meiri. And by the way, that's really Mefarshim on the Rambam. You open up, I'm a big fan of the Makbili in the Quran, for example. They add this Meiri as though it's Pshat in the Rambam. But I don't see that, especially considering that maybe, it contradicts the Yerushalmi. What does the Meiri say? B'nei machane chonim b'chol makom sheyirtzu. The B'nei Machane, slightly different lashon. The camp itself, it camps wherever it wants. Uv makom shenaragim sham rasha'im lekovran. Where they are killed, they may bury them there, but they don't have to. He adds a very important word, rasha'im, with an aleph. Now, that concept we didn't see in the sources, by the way. The Tosefta, the Yerushalmi, the Bavli, they didn't mention rasha'im. How did he die? How did he get this diuk? Afilu ayu lahem sham krovim sheyetzu behem miklal meis mitzvah. He says the word krovim here. Even though there are relatives there and they do want to bury him, they may bury him at the battlefield. Decide to sanctify this land. They may do so. Regular people are not buried there. Unless he's a meis mitzvah. By the way, Meiri disagrees with Rabbi Lieberman's pshat. Okay, Rabbi Lieberman saying the soldier is the ultimate meis mitzvah. As a matter of fact, we learned the din of meis mitzvah from the soldier, not the other way around. Okay? But this Meiri is the one they put into the standard printings of the Rambam nowadays. Like when the Rambam said Shami Kaver, you can bury him there. I would have said that. I would have made an argument that, Sakana, maybe he should be buried there. So there's what to say. Either way, do not be surprised that which they're doing today doesn't exactly fit the sources. Okay?
The Tshuva for the Rav Goren,
Yeah.
why we take bodies away on Shabbat.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
He explains that it's because there's now a sakana of leaving bodies there that they're going to be taken by enemies.
Yeah, and that sakana, they're going to use it as chips, was only exacerbated or even created by the silly psak, I say silly, that goes against Chazal, that we have to redeem our captives. We'll do anything. I heard Chagai Lober get into an argument with Feiglin. Poor guy. Chagai Lober lost his son. Feiglin lost his grandson. And Feiglin was trying to say that we shouldn't encourage our enemies by telling them we will do anything to rescue a captive or even rescue a corpse. Okay? There is, unfortunately, very little halachic evidence that we should give anything for someone who's already dead. Okay? Kal v'chomer, for someone alive, you're not supposed to give more than the price. Kal v'chomer, someone who's dead. But even for someone alive,
Well, Goren made his tshuva.
Goren, yeah.
He made his tshuva because of the Arabs had taken the soldier's body and chopped them up, and spread it all across the field.
Yeah.
Like that.
So what's the response? Not like what are we going to do to prevent this from happening next time. The answer, like Rav Sharkey and other moral individuals have pointed out, is the answer you get from the Nevi'im. You hit them even harder. You teach them you don't do that. Look, every now and then someone says the false argument. They say using deterrence, the threat of the death penalty or the death penalty doesn't stop murders. Look, a murder happened. So why you have the death penalty? It doesn't deter people. The answer is, of course it deters. There's always going to be a certain percentage that you cannot. But without the deterrence, it would be much greater. So unfortunately, yes, you will. And the Tanakh even has this terrible done to Jewish corpses. Who's the best example of people who were mutilated? Saul. That wasn't done by the bad guys. Those were Jews to Jews. Talking about the Philistines found Saul and his sons. What did they do them? Well, yeah, and they did, and they did. It was terrible. So, the answer to that is punish them, destroy them. Not now we have to come sock and we're going to say to assuage the soldiers' fears. We're going to promise to do whatever we can to redeem them. That's the opposite. Now you're incentivizing. Basically, these psukim did exactly what Chazal said not to do, and that was incentivize further. So yes, it may make the soldier feel good that even if I'm killed, they'll do anything to get my body back. Yeah, but at the price of what? Hundreds of other soldiers, which is perverse.
The story you provided with Shilo, they snuck into the middle of the Palestinian city.
Yeah, that wasn't the psak. That was a bunch of vigilantes did that. But I'm talking about what should an army do if it was, let's say, trying to keep halacha. So you cannot have these psukim. A lot of psukim from the mid 20th century and on, as we saw, just fly in the face of Chazal.